I like to place this under like this is even too offensive for liberals category, right? Like, because liberals put up with a lot of shit. They put up with a lot of shit. They don't really care if the country is like more reactionary. Ultimately, they care about it because they make the mental calculus that like, will we have another Democratic reign in which, you know, we get to hurt the Republicans a little bit. We don't really care. They're very cynical about a lot of things. This is the first time that the High Court will weigh in on the historic prosecution of the former president. Let's take a look.
Special counsel Jack Smith is asking the Supreme Court to decide whether Donald Trump has immunity from criminal prosecution for alleged crimes he committed while in office. CNN's Paula Reed and Joan Biskupik join me now. Paula.
Why the fuck would he have immunity at all? He's the president. And while we like to claim that we have a democratic process where every man is equal, that's not the case in the way that things are supposed to work. Especially, you know, like the president is kind of like a god, you know? It's just, you have to kind of be like a god. That's or at least that's the mentality. And that's what we're looking at right now. Is he above the law? Yeah. No, is Animal Farm, some are created more equal than others? Yeah, all men are equal, except some are more equal than others, you know?
Explain what Jack Smith asked of the Supreme Court exactly.
This is huge. This is the first time the special counsel is going right to the Supreme Court, and he is asking them to decide the question of whether former President Trump is immune from criminal prosecution. Now, this is a question that Trump has been litigating. He lost at the district court level.
I do love this argument because it's basically like, oh, can the president come fuck my virgin wife on the day of our marriage? Can he do that? Is he allowed to do that? Will the president come fuck my virgin wife in the village when on the day of my marriage with her? Maybe. I mean, he's got the right. It's his right. If he wants to do it, he can. You know, we haven't really advanced all that much. We think because we have like iPhones and you know, all of these like amenities and technology and shit that we're like above the idiotic former ways in which we operate. Yeah, exactly, dude. He was pardoned. That's what I mean. What do you think? It's a continuation of the same process.
He said he intended to appeal, but usually an appeal would at least first go to the Court of Appeals, and then, depending on what happens there, possibly go to the Supreme Court. But the special counsel here is saying, no, just you guys take this up now. Because, yes, this is an interesting constitutional question, but the special counsel is mindful of the calendar. This is all about timing. So here the special counsel is saying, look, we need you to decide this now.
Is this not giving carte blanche? U.S. v. Nixon kind of said the president is not above the law. It would be a dangerous precedent for SCOTUS to basically overrule this. Yeah, like a super precedent, you know. I mean, good thing our Supreme Court of the United States currently has no super precedents that they that have overwhelming favor in the public for decades. Good thing that they've never actually turned around and you know, overruled stuff like that from an incredibly biased perspective. Ms. Talk shit talked to you right after the tournament. Misgive Hate Watcher won. most normal dude. At least he fucking identified himself as like a normal guy. Hello, I'm Misgive Hate Watcher 1. Well, time to move on to my other account, Misgive Hate Watcher 2. We already have rules about prosecuting presidents in office, so the answer is no, he has no immunity. My friend. I don't know how to describe this to you, but like all of this stuff is fake. I don't know how else to talk about it. Like, constitutional law for the most part is an entire fucking field. that is dedicated to like normalizing reactionary psychopathic ideas under the auspices of like some kind of intelligent analysis, some kind of critical thinking. The entire purpose of like of strict textualists and their like legal constitutional analysis is a way for those guys to be able to just like drink cocktails with the liberal intelligentsia and act like they simply have an intellectual disagreement, and not one that is just a reactionary, incredibly biased, conservative agenda that they're advancing. That's where this comes from. It's silly. It's made up. It's made up. Here, I'll use smaller words for you. Right-wing Supreme Court justices and their analysis of the Constitution is not a real interpretation, is not a real disagreement. It's simply them pointing to the, trying to find something in the text that goes, no, the founding fathers would agree with me. Okay? But it's not actually something that the founding fathers would agree with them on. It's just simply stating whatever the biased conservative argument they have, and then looking for a supposedly intellectual and operating in an intellectual framework, a framework that didn't necessarily exist all that long ago. Okay, it is, yeah, a good word would be a veneer, I guess, but that's a big word too. I like to say the intellectual patina, but it's not. They're just looking at it and going, I don't think women should have bodily autonomy. I can't just straight up say that, so I have to make it seem like that. You are correct. For example, the Rahimi case coming up in SCOTUS term asked the question of whether someone convicted of domestic violence can purchase a firearm. There's nothing in the nation's history or tradition that allows such a person to get a firearm, yet we know exactly how the case is going to go. Exactly. And there are so many circumstances where the heavily right-wing, supermajority right-wing Supreme Court has no real interpretation, no real strict originalist argument to make, or no strict like textualist argument to make. And we already know exactly which way they're going to decide. And we have to sit around and play this song and dance as though like, no, you don't understand. They're really brilliant. They've read a lot of books. They read a lot of books on the law, and they have this well-defined worldview, and that's why they are deciding in this way. You simply do not understand. Okay? You simply do not understand. These 9 appointed lifetime position Supreme Court justices are too brilliant, and you can't comprehend it. They're simply, you mean to tell me that they're simply operating on their own personal individual biases? Like, you're telling me that they're just literally going, I'm right wing. What's the right wing position on this? Boom. That's it. No way. No fucking way. No shot. Get out of here. Except that is precisely what's going on. Everything else is just bullshit. There are, of course, the supposed moderate conservative factions within the Supreme Court that, for example, care about the institution and maintaining the institution's sanctity, okay? And those guys are sometimes going to throw a bone in the other direction. Even Brett Kavanaugh from time to time might throw you a bone and have you shocked and go, oh, well, you see, these guys maybe aren't doing that. Maybe they are actually legitimately assessing all of these situations. This is bullshit. It's just another way to keep up that facade. Roe v. Wade should have made everybody understand the truth. Okay? It should have made every single person realize, like, oh, these guys are fucking clown asses. One of the most favored Supreme Court justices, like a legendary Supreme Court justice in contemporary American history, is Antonin Scalia. Should never allow an Italian on the Supreme Court or in a position of power, is what I say always. And Antonin Scalia, of course, is not an exception to the rule. He's just a continuation of said rule. Anthony Scalia has had some of my favorite opinions. He has opined, like when he said torture is permissible, by citing the television show 24 as his reasoning as to why torture is actually permissible, because in the television show 24, the hero tortures a terrorist to figure out if a nuke is going to wipe out America or not. And that's why we should keep torturing terrorists. That's a real thing he wrote. Doesn't end there. Anthony Scalia was, of course, obviously anti-gay marriage and said incredibly reactionary things like the homosexual agenda. That was one of my first instances in college when I was learning constitutional law, when I found out that Anthony Scalia made the slippery slope argument against gay marriage, saying, well, what's to stop man from marrying dog? If man can marry man, then what if man marry dog? When he said that, I was like, oh, this is all bullshit. That was literally, I think I was like sophomore, maybe junior in college. I don't remember when I took the constitutional law class, but I was like, that's when it lasered me. Like in my brain, I still remember that moment. I had a dyslexic constitutional law professor who couldn't write, but whatever. He was fine. When I found that out, I was like, oh, this is bullshit. This is all bullshit. Anthony Scalia is a well-respected legal scholar, right? In the eyes of the bold, brave, beautiful, smart, liberal thinkers. I mean, he's well-respected. Famously took Clarence under his wing. They were besties. Didn't Scalia die on one of those hunting trips? Yes, he did. Same argument stands for abortion. The right-wing justices said that abortion is a fundamental right, was not deeply rooted in his nation's history and tradition. Meanwhile, there's literal evidence that Ben Franklin wrote about books. Yep, I've talked about all this. Benjamin Franklin wrote a math book, or like a all-intensive, like all-purpose book, in which he talked about at-home remedies for abortion, like how to fucking do an abortion at home. That's how fucking little they gave a shit, okay? How to do an abortion. That's how little abortion was like a thing. People were like, yeah, fuck yeah, of course you're going to have an abortion. What do you mean? The idea that like these guys legitimately were following through on what our forefathers or founding fathers actually wanted to do is really stupid. Because, not to pull an Austin show, but the Constitution is a living, breathing fucking document. If that wasn't the case, then there would be no amendments to the Constitution or no way to amend the Constitution. It's so stupid. The very reason why the Supreme Court exists defeats, in the most reductive terms, the arguments that these fucking right-wingers make about it. There would be no reason to, there would be nothing. There would be no reason for a Supreme Court to exist at all. Yeah, judicial review literally exists for this reason. But of course, the United States of America is ostensibly a secular nation, even though it's not really. And the one fundamental thing that you have to remind yourself all the time is that America's religion is capitalism. Okay? And yes, our Bible is the Constitution 100%. The way we treat the Constitution is like akin to the fucking Bible. Law tip: mere factual innocence is no reason not to carry out a death sentence properly reached. Tony Scalia. Also, he cited the Bible in a dissent once law. Yeah. I love that. I fucking love that because, like, it's just our Supreme Court justices love executing black and brown people with intellectual disabilities. Like, that's their favorite pastime. They will never stop that. That's That's part of the job. They're like literally, you know, oh, I get to fucking fly around with a rich billionaire that I'm partnered up with by the Federalist Society. Sure, fine. How many black people do I get to kill? How many Down syndrome black people do I get to fucking execute? Like straight up. So consistently. You think I'm crazy? You hit a but like it quite literally is a one of the most principled, consistent positions of the fucking Supreme Court of the United States. Is to always side with the state in its endless endeavor to engage in capital punishment on intellectually disabled black and brown people in prison. I'm so surprised that these things you say about conservatives don't get clipped out of context and people aren't trying to say you think those things. They do. Sometimes they do. All right. Let's continue.
So that this case can go on as planned in March. In fact, they're also saying that, look, even if you don't want to skip the Court of Appeals, can you at least tell the Court of Appeals to do this quickly? Because, Dana, if a question like this goes through the normal channels, it can take months, possibly well over a year to decide this, which could push that trial until after the election.
Joan, how likely is it, based on your experience in covering the court, that they will say yes to short-circuiting the process?
Well, what Jack Smith has done with his team is to point up a very important precedent, taking us all back to the summer of 1974 and the Watergate era and the tapes case. And what Jack Smith is saying here is that this court was able to handle that kind of urgent question back in 1974, heard arguments. I think they got the petition in the summer, June, July. They heard arguments roughly July 9th, if I'm remembering right, and they issued an opinion on July 24th. This was all in a matter of days, and we know what the consequence there was. The court said unanimously that Richard Nixon did not have absolute privilege to withhold those tapes. This kind of question is exactly of that magnitude now. And what they're saying is, today is what, the 11th? They're saying if get the response from the other side, from the Trump team by December 18th, and we will waive a longer response period ourselves to get this all on the calendar as soon as possible. And the justices actually could do it. They have space in their calendar to do this. It's not, we don't have the kind of term we had 2 years ago. They don't have yet a big abortion case pending. They could pick one up this Wednesday, actually, the abortion medication case. But what Jack Smith has tried to do here is say, whatever else you have, this is so important. Yeah. It involves obviously things stemming from January 6th, the imminence of the trial coming, and the need for the Supreme Court to step in and resolve this immunity question is so important.
Yeah, what you just said is well, all of what you both said is very important, but the precedent, the fact that Jack Smith is pointing to Watergate.
Yeah.
And not only is that critical for president, it also reminds all of us how, to use your word, huge this is and would be when it comes to the
HasanAbi says, here's how I see this going. SCOTUS distinguishes this from Nixon and holds that the president is immune from any federal prosecution for actions during their time in office. It's distinguished from Nixon because Nixon only applies to civil proceedings. Very worrying. But that doesn't... I mean, that means the president can do federal crimes while in office, which is insane. Which, I mean, I guess technically the president does do federal crimes while he's in office. Let's be fucking real. They already do that. But it's like wild to just be like, no, it's totally valid. You can do it, King. You have the go-ahead. I don't know.
The ability or inability to prosecute a former president and whether or not he would be immune.
What do you think, Elliot?
No, look, they can do it, and the Supreme Court can grant this. And as Paul had said, they have the clock on their minds here. And look, everybody knew that this was eventually going to make it to the Supreme Court in one way or another. Now, the normal course of action would be to go to the appeals court. That could take months and months, and they'd ultimately draft a decision there, and then which would be appealed to the Supreme Court. Parties are allowed to go straight to the Supreme Court. This is an important constitutional question. It's never been resolved, and that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It is just a...
I mean, I feel like Jack Smith's a pretty smart guy and plays by the book. So I feel like if he didn't have at least some semblance of confidence that this would not, that like he probably looks at the Supreme Court, recognizes that it's a very political decision here. I assume he thinks that at a time when the Supreme Court is historically unpopular, more unpopular than ever, right? I think. I would have to look this up. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the Supreme Court is. I know the Supreme Court was very unpopular immediately after the Roe v. Wade decision, but I would suspect that, considering what the Supreme Court's decisions have looked like over the course of the past couple of months, where like every now and then they throw a bone in the other direction, they're certainly scared of the way they're being viewed, right? They already handed like somewhat of a dub to the Democratic Party by acting out the 35-year, 40-year agenda of the Federalist Society against the will of the majority, the overwhelming majority opinion that the last two Supreme Court justices that were appointed straight up, the last three Supreme Court justices that were appointed straight up said they would never overturn because it's a super president. On the record, they said this. And then what did they do? They immediately overturned it. So that was a major blow to the confidence that people have within this institution, which they should. They should not be confident in this institution. I don't believe that this is a real institution that cares about the humanity of people or not Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'm talking about the three Trump appointees. They did not give Republicans a dub. Politically speaking, that decision was deeply unpopular. That position was that decision was so unimaginably unpopular that it led Joe Biden in a relatively hollow defeat in the midterms when it was supposed to be a devastating red tide. It's also changed the dynamic of the American voting demographics. Joe Brandon is killing it with white voters now. Just eviscerating the remaining college-educated Republican voting bloc. Just completely fucking destroying it for the Republican Party. Now, of course, Joe Biden is also very old and deeply unpopular due to how old he is. Let's be real. It's mostly because of how old he is. Okay? However, like I said, views of the Supreme Court, according to this Gallup poll from September 29th, is near record lows. 41% approve the Supreme Court jobs performance, close to 40% record low. 49% have trust and confidence in the Supreme Court, near 47% historical low. 39% say the high court is too conservative. 42% say it's about right, and 70% say it's too liberal. I hate this country. The fact that it still says 42% still say it's about right is mind-numbing to me. God, America is such a conservative, reactionary shithole. Holy fuck. It really makes you think when you look at, like, Israel and their public polling, and, like, you think to yourself, how could they be so right-wing? And then you realize, oh, shit, we are just like Israel for real. Israel is just like us, as a matter of fact. When you have a nation state that does not address its former scars, and you increasingly go right-wing, you know, it's gonna continue being that way. We're going to get more and more right-wing. The public's opinion is going to be more and more right-wing. HasanAbi says, I think Jack Smith is backed into a corner. Trump will raise this regardless, and it would go through all the appeals process and would gradually get to SCOTUS. That would push the trial away past January 2025 for sure. I think this is the only way Jack Smith makes sure that these trials possibly end before the election. Trump knows the only way he gets out of this is if he pardoned himself. This just speeds up the process. I mean, this would be a ginormous dub handed off to the Trump presidential campaign. Not letting this play out in the courts when there's a mountain of evidence as to the shit that Donald Trump did by simply just going, yeah, no, he has immunity in this time frame, so he can do whatever fucking federal crimes he wants to, when there is so much evidence, like an unimaginable amount of evidence. When all of that is said and done, and the Supreme Court, which is incredibly biased in favor of Donald Trump, goes, yeah, no, he is the God King, actually. When you're the president, they let you do it. It's just crazy. I think the Supreme Court kicks this can so that this does play out in the courts.
Complex question. It has to go to the Supreme Court. Who knows what they're going to do with it? They may, as Paul said, they may kick it back down to the appeals court and either say expedite it or simply just answer first this question of immunity. There's other claims that Trump's team is raising, but the immunity one, is he immune from prosecution, is really the big one that has to be resolved pretty soon.
The reality is these are majority conservative justices, several appointed by Trump. I mean, the reality is they could say, yeah, he has immunity. You can't move forward with this case.
They could, but even before you get there, the very question of whether the Supreme Court takes this kind of case on is itself an open question. The court has been, since 2019, far more frequently granting these emergency requests to go straight to them. Now, that may be a function of the justices who are on the court, or something's changed in their heads. We don't know because we're never in that room. But they've been doing it more frequently. They might do it now, and we just have to wait and see pretty quickly how they're going to resolve it.
Yeah, and just reading through the filing that just came in this afternoon, the special counsel is arguing nothing could be more vital to our democracy than that a president who abuses the electoral system to remain in office is held accountable for criminal conduct. I know that
I like to place this under, like, this is even too offensive for liberals category, right? Like, because liberals put up with a lot of shit. They put up with a lot of shit. They don't really care if the country is, like, more reactionary. Ultimately, they care about it because they make the mental calculus that, like, will we have another Democratic reign in which, you know, we get to hurt the Republicans a little bit. We don't really care. They're very cynical about a lot of things. But this is, in many instances, a bridge too far until the media, of course, until the decisions come, and then the media has to play the role of normalizing this decision because that's their job. That's their role. Their role is to look at all of the fucking psychotic shit that you experience, try to push against it, and then once the decision, when it's all said and done and the decision takes place, then they normalize it by being like, well, you know, maybe it's just fine. They have to spin it. But until that moment comes, they are going to say that this is completely offensive and unacceptable because it destroys the norms that you are supposedly defending.
this is just coming out, Kristen, but are you hearing anything from the Trump camp?
They haven't responded yet, but I do think that we should pay attention to, as Elliot said, looking at the timeline. And that's really what it is about for the Trump people as well. When I talk to them about when this trial is going to happen, they do believe that the March trial is going to happen before the election, that of course being the special counsel's investigation into his overturning or attempting to overturn the 2020 election. But they do still think there is some wiggle room because of the fact that this was going to the appeals court, because of the fact that they believe that they can delay it. I mean, they are going to try and do every single thing they possibly can to push this past the election because they think that Donald Trump can win the election and he's not sitting in trial every single day.
Yeah, I wonder why they think that. Oh, man.
So that is very interesting in this to me, the fact that they have clearly kind of called them on their game and said, okay, you're waiting here, you push this to the appeals court, now we're just going to get it over with. So that takes one element out. One of the things that actually Trump and his team were relying on, having this be a lengthy process.
And there's a little bit of gamesmanship there because the Trump team could have appealed to a three-judge panel of the Court of Appeals. If they didn't get a decision they liked there, they could have then appealed it to the full Court of Appeals. And then if they didn't like the decision there, they could have then taken it to the Supreme Court. Even under the best of circumstances for the Trump team, that could have taken months. And I think, like you said, it's calling the bluff.
Yeah.
Now, again, the Supreme Court doesn't have to agree to it, as we know, but this was a very aggressive step by the prosecutors to move this case along.
It's huge because really the Trump legal strategy boils down to delay, delay, delay. And there was a hope that this constitutional question, which has never been decided before, would take a little while to get through the appellate process, possibly even go en banc, then go to the Supreme Court. And they hope that it could at least delay this trial, which has a ripple effect on other criminal trials, until after the election. So it's clear the special counsel is like, nope, we're going to try this option. This is aggressive. This is the first time they've gone to the Supreme Court. Now the question is whether the Supreme Court wants to do this, if they want to completely reject the request or meet them halfway and maybe just say to the appellate court, look, we all know time is of the essence here. There is a public interest. Let's move it along. Let's not sit on this one for a year.
How long, so just timeline-wise, when can we expect to hear from the Supreme Court?
I mean, it's the Supreme Court. They kind of do what they do when they want to do it. So I would expect that they...
It's really cool that they also literally are just like very openly corrupt, and they just put out like a press briefer talking about their ethics and their code of conduct. And it was just basically like, nothing is changing. We are going to get wined and dined by whatever billionaire we want to. Suck my dick. And that's where we're at. That's where we're at. Will, no, my body does not feel like a bag of broken glass. I would say that, I mean, I do have some issues for sure, but I still worked out this morning. You know, I sucked it up and I took some Advil and I worked through it. But going back to the issue at hand, it's cool. It's cool that they're not even trying to make it seem like they're impartial or not compromised. They're very compromised and they're very open about it, and it doesn't really matter as long as you have enough money.
They too were probably mindful of the timeline here, so I would expect we'll hear from this soon. But they don't have a deadline.
Yeah. And it's just a reminder, right, of the collision between these legal cases and the fact that Trump is running for president, and we're in the lead up to the Iowa caucuses, right? And just today, he was going to testify and then pulled out last minute.
Pulls out last minute, doesn't show up. You know, looks like, okay, this case is wrapping up, but that doesn't mean his legal problems are wrapping up. They're really just ramping up. And that's happening at the same time that his campaign is ramping up. And you look at the schedule for January with both the Iowa caucuses as well as New Hampshire primary, and he's going to be on the road a lot.
They keep showing this over and over again, which is like, hey guys, by the way, once January starts, you know, you got the debate, the CNN debate, the Iowa debate on CNN. And then the Iowa caucuses start on the 15th of January. By the way, 2024, it's Jover. I mean, we're going right dick first into this shit, okay? And then you have the New Hampshire debate on the 18th where Chris Christie's going to make big moves, big money moves, okay? We're pulling for him. We're pulling for Chris. And then the CNN New Hampshire debate is on the 21st of January, and then the New Hampshire GOP primary is on the 23rd. Yeah, it's beginning. The beginning of the end.
Lot more. He has to be in many of these states. We know that he is looking at New Hampshire. He sees the field there. They are not feeling as confident as they feel in Iowa. So he has to be traveling. Well, when they're trying to plan, it's actually been very difficult, according to the people around him, because they can't plan that far in ahead. Even if they think that they know the dates of the hearing in March that's going to be here in D.C., they don't think they're set in stone because of these various legal maneuverings that his lawyers are doing to try and get those dates delayed.
And, you know, I think a lot of folks don't realize that these are two completely different government systems that exist independently of each other. And yes, we have these elections every 4 years, but it's not, many judges regard it as not their responsibility to time their proceedings to accommodate other things in government like elections and so on. And they take a long time to get to trial sometimes.
And we've seen that argument. We've
Yeah.
seen that argument that judges shouldn't have to worry about the election, but that's exactly what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to tie the politics to the legal to say, look, they're taking this up because they want to rule against me. And he's going to use that politically.
And you guys just had that graphic up with just the month of January and how busy it is with different campaign events. The idea of adding potentially oral arguments at the Supreme Court, even in the middle of January on this central issue that would really decide whether he goes to trial before or after the election. Again, a massive development.
It absolutely is. Thank you for helping us better understand what this means. Thank you. Paula Reed, Kristen Holmes, Elliot Williams.
Bringing up the latest now on Donald Trump on the campaign trail over the weekend, defending comments